Good evening and welcome to Parental Units and Their Place in the Admissions Process, part of our college admissions literacy series designed to bring parents and families better information about higher education and better access to college admissions. I'm Kelsey Tarosian, the Director of Client Services at Colledge, and I am absolutely thrilled to have so many parents out there joining Jenny and me tonight. Speaking of Jenny, for those of you who don't know Jenny Umhofer yet, she is our president and founder and will be pulling from a decade of experience from the admissions side, nearly 15 years of experience working with students at Colledge, and of course, her experience as a parent of 2 teens. So welcome, Jenny.
Thank you, Kelsey. Great to be here.
Yeah, and Jenny and I are so excited. We also have a parent who's going to join us a little bit later on who has worked with us with 3 of her daughters to share her wisdom from the parental side directly, having gone through the process. And of course, we have a very special discount card that we're giving for all of you live viewers. It's for our student assessment for admission, so stay tuned. We're also going to be sending out our Colledge parent timeline. We'll make sure you get both of those at the end of tonight's talk. We're going to have you just fill out a 1-minute form in the chat anytime before noon tomorrow, and you'll get those gifts. So I'm going to put those into the comments box now. And I want to also invite all of you to add any questions that you may have for us into your comments box on your streaming platform. We're going to have some time for Q&A at the end of tonight's event. So we're going to do our best to get to as many of your good questions as we can. All right, so take it away, Jenny.
Oh, thanks so much, Kelsey. It's really great to have so many great parents here tonight. I want to start us off with some common parental unit mistakes. After working with so many different parents and students over the many, many years, I've noticed that there are certain things that kind of parents get tripped up on again and again, and it's tough. It's a like sort of a peaks and valleys kind of a path with your teenager as they go through this. And but really to try to focus on these kind of main common mistakes as sort of things to avoid. I would say number 1, to parents who are overly involved, maybe too involved in their child's sort of decision making and planning process with college admissions. That would be sort of, and your child, your student will probably tell you, step back, mom or dad, I got this. So, maybe just check that, make sure there's not too much over involvement. Number 2 is, being unaware of your own parental agenda. I think that parents have the best intentions again and again, but perhaps they don't realize their parental agenda is maybe taking over the process. So the awareness is really the main sort of thing to focus on. But that is one mistake I see parents making, is just sort of unawareness of that agenda is there. Mm-hmm. And number 3, I would say a common mistake is sometimes parents, super busy parents, might check out a little bit too much. And so that's sort of an opposite extreme of over involvement. When you are checked out, it also doesn't help your child. So you definitely want to stay in tune with what's happening and striking that balance. Mm-hmm. Number 4, I would say, parents who are stuck on specific schools, like, a school like, for example, USC is a really popular school that many parents have gone to. Not all, but that school tends to kind of come up a lot. Fight on. But if you're stuck on that school, or if you're stuck on another school that you went to, or that you think your child should go to, that might be a bit of a mistake. Given that this is really a process that the student will have to discover what their best right fit is. And then finally, number 5 is sort of checking all the boxes. Colleges can kind of tell when a student has taken their parents' advice so much that they're checking all the boxes, like getting all of these AP courses in on their transcript. Maybe they have, all of this involvement in volunteer work or captain or leadership, sort of doing it in a way that is a little bit too rote and not enough depth or discovery or meaning behind some of the activities, that would be how we would define checking all the boxes. And you kind of want to avoid that as a parent.
Mm-hmm. Such great advice. I mean, it's really about staying kind of in step and supporting your child as they go through. And I just wanted to add in a little bit more of, we've all seen kind of, we've all seen some of the news coming out about people getting rejected at different places unexpectedly. And so I just wanted to kind of empower all of you parents out there with knowledge and kind of underline the importance of having really good information. So there's been a lot of change in the last 3 years. We've seen the college admissions landscape change more rapidly than probably ever before. I think it's safe to say. And we see more change on the horizon. But just to kind of unpack where all this change is coming from, there are really these 3 key factors to watch if you want to stay kind of really with your finger on the pulse of what's happening and what might change. Number 1 is the test optional movement. Now, there were always test optional schools long before the pandemic ever shut down testing sites. But starting in 2020, when that testing really became unavailable and all schools had to go test optional with very few exceptions, that really lowered a barrier for students who were otherwise wonderful applicants, very, very admissible, very exciting to many different colleges, who, for whatever reason, simply didn't have that wonderful test score to match everything else that they had. And that kind of trickled into drastic changes to applicant pools and therefore admit rates. Now, it can feel like that means it's just getting impossible to get into college anywhere. And that actually isn't the case. What's happening is really a mass redistribution where students were starting to apply a bit more broadly to the more highly selective schools with this test optional change. And then the other thing that's kind of coming down the pike is the Supreme Court decision on race-conscious admissions and the use of race-conscious admissions, which is likely to come in the next month or so. We don't know what that's going to look like, but we do know that depending on what the decision is, it's going to change by necessity the way that colleges are able to review all applications. So this is something that is going to be change on the heels of a lot of change. So it's just something to really pay attention to. And just to kind of give you a little bit of information about the specifics, you can see here on my screen, we've compared the graduating class of 2020. So this is the last pre-pandemic admissions kind of class to the class of 2023. And you can see, whereas USC and NYU were at 15 and 16%, this year they're both at 8%. Whereas Harvard was at 5.2%, which is still not that big. They've dropped to 3.41% this year. And UCLA, you can see it's also dropped almost in half. And so how does this help you, right? With admit rates dropping, there is this tremendous social pressure on your child, and they really are feeling it. I don't know your child, but I know that from having spoken to a lot of high school kids. So what you can do is really take a breath, really try to focus on the good. See your child's wonderful, unique, amazing qualities. Keep your child's mental health, feelings, and emotions at the center of things, because those really are important, right? Like applying to a bunch of schools just to apply and then getting rejected really can be damaging. It really doesn't feel good. So helping them focus on fit, helping them focus on knowing that no matter where they get in, they're a wonderful human. Keep a close eye on this. And keep in mind also that there are many, many, many wonderful colleges out there in this country alone. And your child is going to be okay landing at any number of them.
So well said, Kelsey. That was brilliant. Thank you.
Jamie. Okay, so getting into a little bit of the nitty-gritty of the application year. So we're going to send this out to you as one of your giveaways. You'll have this. You don't need to screenshot or, try to manually write it down. But you'll see we've kind of outlined it, and you'll see for anybody who's younger than a junior, whose students have younger than junior, whose child is younger than a junior, you can see that we actually get started in January. So pay close attention, you sophomore and freshman parents, and make sure that you get started in January of junior year. You can see that right now we're in a phase that's all around choosing colleges, listening to the student, helping them discover who they are and what college has to offer them. And then the summer really is for writing and filling out those applications, so that by the time they hit all of the intensity of senior year and those really big leadership opportunities and hardest classes and everything like that, hopefully your child can have the bulk, the heaviest lift of their writing process out of the way, so that it's not on top of the crush of all of that other senior year stuff. Then October to January is when those deadlines come up, and you're going to be submitting, reviewing, and submitting, and reviewing and submitting. And then the spring of senior year is actually one of the hardest times, because unless your child was admitted in early decision, it's waiting, right? And the farther that your child gets away from hitting that submit button, the more that it can feel a little insecure. It can be really easy to lose track of all the good, confident work that they did. So celebrate every single success and help them really, like, remain calm, channel that anxiety. And so yes, this is a little bit of what to expect in senior year, junior and senior year.
So helpful, Kelsey. We want to talk a little bit about sort of some do's and don'ts. It's really important to kind of clarify sort of how you're going to balance your relationship. Every parent is different with their agendas and their life experiences, and every parent-child relationship is a little bit different. But these are just some guidelines that we wanted to give you to sort of help you clarify. Mm-hmm. So for do's, I'll start with the do's. We want to be positive. So number one, have some open discussions. Those discussions that you have in those early years about your values, about, what you see as your child's strengths and who they really are really valuable as they start to think about college. And to talk about college, talk about it as not a scary thing and not something to be afraid of, but that there will be a process, and, you'll continue to have these open discussions about it. And, you'll identify things that are important to you along the way, as well as listen to your child as well. So number two, I would say create structure. There is only so many days between 9th and 12th grade, right, until the applications are due, which is actually at the beginning. If the student is applying early, it will be towards the beginning of senior year. So you kind of need to back that up to, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th to really think about, creating that structure where your child can thrive and can really shine and can really grow and become who they are. So creating that structure along the way will be really helpful. Number three, along with creating structure, I would say limiting choices. That's one thing that as a parent, you do kind of have is, you can do, you might, for example, give your child an option to do, 2 sports versus 5 or 10, right? Or maybe that you want them to do service, but you want them to have those service hours be close to home, or, that type of thing. So kind of limiting the choices can provide sort of a healthy structure to their decision-making, and they won't get overwhelmed. Number 4, I would say, this is sort of my personal, belief, that you should really insist on service-oriented activities. You can model that too by doing your own service sort of volunteer work in your community, even if it's, 1 hour a week. It could be, packing lunches for the homeless, or it could be, it could be a myriad of things, but really to kind of insist on it, I think is an important thing that you're going to teach and model for your child to learn. And then that will be translatable into, not only college, but life in general, to be of service. Number 5, support academic success. So I think really, get excited and celebrate those moments of success. When a student comes home and they're excited about something they achieved, get excited and, be their champion with those academic successes. That will really help to counterbalance some of those negative self messages that they might already be saying. Number 6, I would say instill perspective and values. You have so many more years than your child of life, and, sort of have that perspective that you may be able to, shed some light on a broader view for your child. So I would definitely instill those values and perspectives along the way. And then number 7, encourage ownership. So your child is in the driver's seat, your child is going to college, and you want them to take that ownership, throughout. So those are the do's.
And I get to come in with the don'ts. Still important, though not as positive. Number 1, you might be surprised to hear coming from especially a college consulting group, but don't overemphasize college preparation, and especially parents of younger students. You want your child to really be able to be in high school and enjoy moving through all of the classes, all of the learning, all of the experiences that they're going to be having, and get to know themselves and get to discover their passions, right? And if they're busy focused on a goal too early, now that's not to say that it shouldn't be a part of the conversation at all. Certainly, students need the message early on that grades are important, for example, but overemphasizing college preparation can lead into that kind of box ticking that Jenny was talking about earlier. The second one is don't be afraid of conflict. And this might sound a little odd, but there are times when your child is going to need that kind of, strength to stand up against whatever maybe perhaps slightly lazy tendency they may have, or resistance, right? So really being able to jump in and insert yourself kind of assertively, offer your perspective, that kind of thing is super important. Number 3 is what I call enabling lazy-mindedness. Students oftentimes, haven't yet learned necessarily the value of digging deeper, right? I know so many of my students, before they start working with me, usually write one draft of any English essay before they turn it in, the night before, and are therefore perhaps a little bit unwilling to review, revise, revisit. But just as an example, when we see students start their essays really early and let them kind of grow and develop over the course of months, we see a really big difference over one that has only been able to develop just a little bit. So helping them really analyze and take ownership, moving away from that lazy-mindedness. And then 4, of course, kind of underlying, don't take over their process. The process piece is super important, right? They need to be able to discover, again, who they are, what the colleges have to offer them. And that piece, when it's done correctly, it really is a process, and it can be deeply transformative and lead to your child being more successful in college and more ready to actually go to college. So those are our kind of do's and don'ts. So now the moment you may all have been waiting for. We're super excited to welcome our Colledge parent who has just graduated her 3rd child with us. Welcome, Kim. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So we're so excited to hear from you. You've had 3 amazing daughters. And we worked with all 3 of them. And by the 3rd one, applying just this year, about to graduate, you really, I imagine you must have felt like you had all the expertise that you needed. You've done it 3 times. Do you think that that's a fair statement? Did you have all the knowledge that you needed?
There was definitely a learning curve along the way. However, each of my daughters was very unique in just their application process, the experience that they had choosing colleges, deciding where they wanted to apply, and then going through the actual process of applying, writing essays and everything like that. So although I do feel like we learned quite a bit along the way, by the time we got to, my youngest, we're like, okay, we kind of were familiar with the process. There were still a lot of unique things that we encountered with her, so that the help from Colledge was really vital to her having a successful and process through the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful, Kim. I was wondering if there was anything you wish you could have done differently, like turn back the time. What would you, anything at all?
Right, exactly. I would say probably the number one thing I would have done differently would have been to have probably started the process a little sooner. My oldest was already into her junior year when we started with you guys. And even though we ended up with a great outcome, I do think we would have definitely benefited from having started the process a little bit sooner. She was very uncertain. She had one school she wanted to apply to. So just the process of encouraging her to find some other schools to look at took a lot of time and effort, and it was stressful for her. And she also had absolutely no idea what she wanted to do. So there was definitely a process associated with that for her as well, in just sort of exploring what might she want to study, what would be a good fit as a school, things like that. And I do, looking back, wish we had started probably in her sophomore year. Honestly, to sort of get her to kind of get the ball rolling, get her thinking about some of those things. So, and honestly, with all three of them, you think I would have learned after the first one, but with all three of them, I think, my second one, we did start a little bit earlier. My third one, because of just pandemic and everything, we definitely got a little bit behind. And I do wish with her, we'd started a little bit sooner too, even though we got it done in the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it really can't be overstated, right? The importance of starting that self-discovery process early on so that the student really knows themselves and understands why they're looking for what they feel that they're looking for. What, kind of leading into that, what made you reach out and seek out help from Colledge with your oldest daughter?
Kind of like what I had alluded to before, the fact that she really only had her heart set on one school, and it was one very competitive school to get into. We really felt like we needed the help with just even trying to research, like, where do you begin to even look for other schools, especially given the fact she had no idea what she wanted to do, and it was very daunting to think about just Googling, good colleges. Right, like, where do you even begin? And there's all sorts of rankings and things you can look at, but really getting into kind of the meat of what are these different schools, what do they offer, what's going to be a good fit for her, it was just overwhelming. We didn't even really know where to begin, and that was why we sort of sought out some help.
Great. I mean, I'm so glad that we were able to work with your kids. I got to work with two of them, lightly at least, and you guys are such a great family. Anyway, so having gone through the process 3 times, if you could think back and imagine yourself able to travel back in time to before any of them went through the process, is there any single piece of advice you'd give yourself and therefore all the parents out there listening?
Sure. I think probably the biggest thing would be to not get too caught up in the rankings of school and the quote unquote prestige of certain schools. I was kind of amazed how even, I swear, starting like 8th grade, even like, and then certainly once we got to high school, how much there was pressure between students talking about things coming from guidance counselors. It seemed like everyone was always talking about, well, what's the most prestigious school to get into? So when students are looking and picking which schools they want to apply to, it felt very much like there was such a focus on that, like this laser focus on that. And not to say they aren't good schools. A lot of these schools that are ranked high for a reason, but there are also a lot of schools that might even be a better fit for certain students that are not a good fit just because of their ranking. And I found it interesting too, just, with one of my daughters, she had friends over and they were all talking about where they were going to apply. And I was asking one of them, I said, oh, they said they want to go to Yale. And I said, that's awesome. I said, what are you thinking of studying there? Like, what made you pick that school? And they're like, well, because it's the best school, And so I do feel like there's a lot of that mindset of like, well, I only picked it because it's got a lot of prestige or has a really high ranking. Well, that certainly gives you some information. I think, for us, it was good as we learned along the way to kind of step away from that and more look at what is unique about each school and what was unique about each of our kids so that we could find a good fit for them, because there are so many other factors that are so much more important. The programs they offer, the support for the students. If you have a student that has certain interests or different ways of studying, is that school going to support that so they can be successful? Even just the living situation, my one daughter looked at one place and she's like, I could not live here. And so, but that's important because a lot of it is growing up, and kind of adulting for the first time. And so I really think taking a more holistic approach and looking at all those aspects of the school is probably a much better way to go about it. And that's what I would kind of tell parents who are starting this process, to kind of keep that in mind.
Wonderful advice. We couldn't have said it better ourselves than the way that you just said it. One thing I'll note is that Kim is a parent of a student who attended one of those very, very highly selective schools. So she has the whole gamut, like a bouquet of different schools in her children's basket. And so, this is really coming from somebody who understands all of that. So Jenny, I would love to hear from you too. Over years of working with families, what are some of the specific traits that you've noticed in families with successful processes, and what advice would you give to those families who are starting the process now?
Yeah, I just have 4 words, probably more than 4 words, but take the long view. Really think about your child as a human being who's developing. This is one step towards adulthood, but there's a big, long, time frame that they become adults, right? This is one baby step. A lot of students have, especially during the pandemic, found that they attended a certain school, they got into a certain school, and they decided this isn't the right fit, and they wanted to transfer. We do work with transfer students too. Sometimes students are just not ready, or they're not quite clear enough, and it's okay. So if you as a parent take that long view and you really help your child become the person that they want to be, who they are inherently in a way that's different than you, I think you will succeed. I've been doing this for such a long time, and there's so many different types of parents, and I kind of have a different philosophy. Many high schools and colleges even really recommend parents stay out of it, stay completely out of it, and don't project anything onto the process. And I just don't think that's realistic. I don't think just been up close to it too much for too long to know that that's not realistic. And it's also maybe not helpful. I think that parents do need to be involved and do need to be supportive. And sometimes you might make mistakes, but it's just about really taking that long view and thinking about your child in a bigger sense about their future, and apologizing if you overstep. We do it all the time as parents, right? We do too much, we do too little, we forget something, and so it's okay to be a human being as well in the process, but to stay tuned in to your child and how they're feeling and what their strengths are and their goals are. If they take ownership and they feel your support, whoa, they're just going to take off. No matter where they land in college, they're going to soar because they know you have their back. So
such a powerful message, Jenny. What a wonderful note to kind of begin to close up on. And thank you both for your abundance of wisdom. I'm going to open it up for questions from all of you in just a moment. And as you pop your questions into the comments box on your respective platforms, I want to invite all of you to our next event, the Persnickety process, which is focused on unpacking kind of the nitty-gritty of how admissions at the most highly selective level actually works. So I hope to see all of you there. All right, and with that, let's get to some questions. Let's see, I'm going to take this off so we can see our faces better. So one question I'm seeing come through is about community service. Kind of, how does community service play into the application? Is there any particular type of service that colleges look more favorably at or less favorably at?
I would say that's there isn't a magic sort of community service formula. It really is about, again, your child and focusing on their strengths, their interests, their talents, and trying to kind of think about the local community and the need of the community around you. Service can be as simple as, beach cleanup. It could be, it could be helping your neighbor, get their groceries during the pandemic. It could be, it could be something very formal, like Girl Scouts, or National Charity League, or, something that really requires. Some schools really require kids to do service, and other schools do not. But I do think it's important for character building. I do believe in some of those old school tenets that, if you're of service, you're going to become a much broader person, human being in the long run. And you will be able to, connect with people, frankly, outside of yourself much more readily. So it's a human skill, I think. And I think it can start in 9th grade. I think it can start very early, 8th, 9th, in fact, it could start in 5th grade. Why not start early? Yeah, service is needed everywhere. So.
Yeah. And I would only add to that, I think, tying the service to the student's heart, what they're interested in, what they're passionate about. It's one thing that can really take that service to the next level for your child. The next question I have is coming in for Kim. You mentioned starting late with your youngest daughter. How did you help her get engaged with the process and get her started?
With my youngest daughter, you said? Oh, okay. Yeah. So she came from a very different viewpoint than my other two. She actually wasn't sure about going to a four-year university, honestly, because she just really lacked a lot of confidence. Felt like academically she wasn't going to have a good shot at getting in somewhere. And so she really was kind of checked out of the process, which is why part of the reason we started a little bit later than we wanted with her, because she was just sort of so down on the whole, like, well, I'm never going to get in anywhere. She was very fixated on the prestige thing. Like, well, if I can't get into a school that has, less than a 10% admit rate, then somehow I'm not successful as a student. And so with her, we actually ended up starting the process with her, with just having some evaluations done with her to kind of help her figure out her learning style, what was going to work best for her. And that sort of led into the discussion about schools that would be a good fit for her. And so we had started, I think it was called the Early Start program with her, which was just sort of exploring different options of different schools. And that really was what got her excited about the process. Finally, she started seeing these schools that she's like, well, I've never heard of this school, or I didn't even know about this one. Then she'd start hearing about the programs they offered, the kinds of things she could do there. And she started getting excited about, I could see myself here, and sort of started to really feel like she was owning the process. It was something that she was excited about. And then the whole thing just became a lot easier, honestly, because we didn't feel like we were like dragging her through it, because she was then sort of taking the lead and excited about it. And I mean, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows all the time. There was essay writing and days when she didn't feel like doing it and stuff like that. But overall, she really embraced the process, which really helped a lot.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing about that, because I think there are a lot of students and parents that are in a very similar situation, and that's really helpful to know. Wonderful. Well, I think that is all that we have time for. And as a group that's really trying to reach as many families, as many students as we can, just to provide that good information and better access to college, I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Jenny. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of you at our next event on June 15th.
Thank you, Kelsey.
Yeah.
Thank you,
everybody.